Good morning, good afternoon, good part of the day, everyone. Thank you for joining the largest, fastest growing, and the most active large-scale Scrum community. Started in New York City and has gone viral and global. Today we have a very special guest. I always say very special, but also this very special guest is my friend, Ahmad Fahmy. Born and raised in New York, New Jersey area of the United States, now living globally traveling, I think living in Turkey at the moment. He has an extensive experience with product development at large scale, organizationally, has done a lot of work with various investment banks and corporate companies. He's got only almost 20 years of banking technology experience with financial product management. Technology background is his other big asset. And he is a very well-known speaker, blogger, contributor to learning of crowds, as I call it. And needless to say, he is one of very few respected large-scale Scrum trainers. So today's session is interesting. It will be about the GEMBA sprint. So Ahmad, I don't want to burn any time of yours, so I'll pass the baton over to you so you can own it. And please take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And that's very kind of you, kind introduction. You skipped one country. Before Turkey, I spent 12 years in the UK.
Oh,
and so,
you're right. You're right.
Yeah, so
sorry about that.
No worries. So if you've been to any of my trainings, my classes, my sessions, you know I like to start with some sort of hack to give you at least some value in the case that you find the rest of my talk not very valuable. So at the very least, I can give you something of value. And so because I haven't had a chance to do this, one of my favorite hacks is a hack that, well, let me start with a question. And for this, I'd love you to all turn on your audio. So unmute yourselves just for this one time. Yeah, all right, cool. So this is a hack, and I'm a collector of many, many hacks. This one I love because you use before a presentation. So I don't know if anyone here has been nervous before a presentation. I'm sure the majority of us have been nervous. And a telltale sign when you're nervous is you slur your S's. You don't enunciate your S's. So this is an awesome technique to get your your S ready, but moreover, to get your mind off of, your inner a-hole, off of I'm going to do a bad job and all of that kind of stuff, right? To get your inner a-hole engaged in something else other than I suck, right? So that's sort of the key to to stop your heart rate elevating is to engage your inner a-hole with something else, right? So this does two things. It gets your S ready and it gets your inner a-hole quiet, right? So I want to practice the technique with you now before I jump into my talk. So repeat after me. This is going to be crazy and it's going to be loud, but it's going to be okay. Say, I slit the sheet.
I slit the sheet.
The sheet.
The sheet is slit.
The sheet is slit.
On the slitted sheet, I sit.
On the slitted sheet, I sit.
Okay, great. Now I'm going to say a little bit faster. I slit the sheet. The sheet is slit. On the slitted sheet, I sit. Go ahead.
Split the sheet is slit. Sit on the sit.
I'm going to say it again, but faster. I slit the sheet is slit. On the slitted sheet, I sit.
I slit the sheet is slit. On the sheet, I sit.
All right, perfect. So we're going to stop there. But if you say that like 5 or 6 times, faster and faster and faster, it's going to help you enunciate the S like singers do. But focusing on not, replacing the slit with another word. I'll keep you rated in case your children are there. Keeps your inner a-hole engaged. So there you go. I hope I've added some value. You can now tune off. All right, cool. So as I said to Jean, no slides. I hate slides. I think as we are so used to Zoom and people going through slides, it becomes very easy for all of you to kind of multitask me, put me in a small window. So I'm going to try my best to keep it engaged by just talking and not using any slides. Having said that, there is an exhaustive guide to what I'm going to go through on gembasprint.com, which will sort of redirect you to a really long guide giving you a lot of the details of what I'm not going to say. I should be talking for about 25, 30 minutes or so, basically telling a story and then leaving as much time as I can for questions and answers, which is where I find people get the most value. All right, cool. So for all of us, either leaders, scrum masters, coaches, we're in the behavior change business. That's what we do. We're not in the framework, less safe. These are all just, to me, organizational diets. The business we're in is behavior change at large. And I find nothing more difficult than to change behavior at scale. I mean, I find it difficult to change my own behavior, let alone the behavior of tens of thousands of people. So that's the business we're in, and it's a very, very difficult business, and oftentimes miserable, right? Not to start on a sad note, but it's incredibly difficult because again, we're in the business of changing behavior. And GEMBA Sprint was my attempt to create an experiment to change one of the most difficult behaviors I had encountered, which is getting senior leaders and even managers down to GEMBA. GEMBA is just a Japanese word for the actual place. So the word GEMBA is also used in, like, if you watch a Japanese drama like CSI, GEMBA is the crime scene. It's the actual place. Like if you want to know what happened, you're not going to get a PowerPoint representation of the crime scene. You're going to go to the crime scene, right? That is GEMBA. The US military have another term called the ground truth, where there's many, many popular books and statements. And one of my favorite quotes by General Mathis is that PowerPoint makes us stupid. And he used to pride himself by actually going to the field of battle, or what they call in the military, the ground truth. So getting senior leaders who are responsible for maintaining and changing the system, or dancing with the system, if you will, down to the ground truth has been one of the most difficult behavioral changes I've encountered. I would often hear things like a senior leader or a senior manager say, "How are the teams doing? You know, how's everything going? How are the teams?" And I would say, "Well, you should go spend some time." And say, "Well, I did a skip level, or I did I traveled, you know, the world, and I spoke to many people, and I gave kind of not offsites, you know where they go and they put their hand in their pocket and they like kind of tell what's going on, and they go to the next region. They say, well, we've done that. That's not going to GEMBA. All right, that's a roadshow. So that's been a very difficult behavior change I've had, to get senior leaders, senior managers to the ground truth. And to me, the ground truth, or the place where value is created in product development, are with effectively the developers. Now, that's one very, very difficult behavior change. Another one is when teams are self-managed, they are now coordinating with one another in terms of what's not the work we're going to do, but how are we going to do the work? They're self-organizing to deliver the work based on a prioritized list of features. If they're self-managed, they're deciding amongst themselves, oh, I'm off tomorrow. They're self-organized. What do managers do? In that modality of self-organized, self-managed teams, what do the managers do? The ones that used to tell the teams what to do and do the whole load balancing and resource management, everything now that we believe is an anti-pattern. Not answering that question has led to weaponizing managers against the change. And that's not the fault of the managers. It's not the fault of the managers, right? So I don't want to say, how do you repurpose managers? I want to say, how do we change behaviors such that managers become a force multiplier to change, and not weaponizing them against the change. So that's another change of behavior I was looking to solve. What do you do with managers? Because to me, the success or failure, in my opinion, of most transformations hinges on the managers. Right? So there's senior leaders and there's management, and you can argue which one's more important. but to ignore the managers is to kiss your transformation goodbye. Another sort of behavior change that I'm constantly looking is how do you rebuild the trust between the teams and management and vice versa? It's like a bi-directional distrust based on years and years of anti-patterns, right? Teams don't trust managers, and managers and leaders generally don't trust teams. And I think the word trust is too big and too overloaded. I like the trust equation as a way to deconstruct that. Trust is credibility plus reliability plus sort of safety, all divided by how self-centered the person is. And I believe that in both cases, they're different. Many teams don't feel safe around management, and many managers don't believe teams are reliable when they say it, like give a date, for example. So using trust is too big of a word. So these are some of the problems I'm facing, or I had faced when I came up with this idea of a GEMBA sprint. So what I want to do is quickly, rather than sort of give a lot of abstract concepts, give 2 quick stories, and hopefully both stories add to each other, and then I'll open it for questions and answers. So for those who have ever tried team self-design, right? Team self-design is something that I wrote 9 years ago and published in the school. And one thing that the team self-design pattern taught me was one of the keys for a pattern to be accepted or even tried is the buy-in of a senior leader. A senior leader has that's a great idea, right? Once you have the buy-in of a senior leader, it makes everything very easy. So I was hired by one of the largest financial product companies years ago now to help them with an acquisition, right? Integrating an acquisition. And I knew very quickly that the acquisition itself was fraught with so many problems. Installing any framework is not going to really fix anything. The only thing that these frameworks do, and this is really, really important, in my opinion, for leaders and people to know, is that these frameworks, what they do is they don't give you automatic efficiency or kumbaya. They tell you very quickly through regular releases what's wrong with your organization. That's what they do, right? Ken Schwaber, he probably can't say this anymore, but he said, Scrum is nothing more than your mother-in-law. She's going to tell you everything wrong with you, right? That's what Scrum does. Through frequent and deliveries, it tells you what's wrong. Now at scale, and most of us are working at scale, it's not telling you what's wrong with you as a team. It's telling you what's wrong with you as an organization, right? The heart of sort of this empirical process control at scale is that through the attempt to frequently deliver, it's going to tell you what's wrong with your organization. It's not going to give you any sort of magic. And that's one of the problems. Senior leaders are either sold or believe or have this false belief. If we install less, we install safe, we install whatever, it's like installing some sort of software. It's going to be better a lot quicker. No, this is software that's going to generate lots of noise. But here's the problem. What if you're not there to hear the noise? And that is an epidemic we have in our industry. Leaders install this thing. They say, I'm going to pay tens of millions of dollars for training and all of these kinds of things. I'm going to hire coaches, all this great stuff. These are designed to surface a lot of noise. But what if they're not there to hear the noise? Or what if by the time the message has reached that senior leader, well, everything is great. Teams are happy. We have Post-it notes everywhere. There's magic whiteboards. If you take a walk, you'll see people standing and talking and laughing, right? But they're not there to actually hear the noise, taste the food, right? So when I was hired by this company, the first thing is I went to the CIO and I told him, look, there's no magic in what I can do. What I suggest is you come with me to India for a sprint and join a team. If you really want to know what's going on, come with me to India to join a team. And this is an organization that had one product had about 22 teams. Don't ask me how the teams are. If you really want to know, and if you do this, it will signal to your leadership and your management that this is an important activity. If you do not do this, I'm going to hit up against the B word. We're too busy. Sounds like a great idea. We have no time. And don't get me wrong, managers are too busy, but busy is just a euphemism. It's just another way of saying that's not a priority. So when I go to the US and I ask my sister, you want to go have lunch? And she goes to me, oh, I'd love to. I'm just so busy. My sister's just telling me you're not a priority, right? I do love my sister though, in case she sees this recording. That's all it means. Busy just means it's not a priority. But if you, CIO of the parent company, come with me, join a team for a sprint, it's going to signal to your leadership and to management that it's an important activity. And then we had a bunch of questions, and he said, I get it. I get it. I'm all in. I'm all in. Let's schedule it in the future. And we had some conversations. As soon as he scheduled it, as soon as he said, I'm going to do this, and I told him, do not force anyone to come. Just say, I am going to do this. Who wants to come with me to India? Because I'm a big believer in volunteering and not being voluntold. When he did this, I want to say over a dozen managers flew from all around the world, from Seattle, from New York, from Florida to India to join the team, each of which joined the team. And so when I asked him, what do you want from me? What does success look like to you? He pulled out something. He's like, look, I'd like this organization to do twice as much. That's what I want from you. I said, fine. What we will do is we're going to ask this organization to deliver twice as much. No problem. As long as you're there with them trying to deliver twice as much. And so he agreed. So we said, okay, we'll double up the features and we'll all go to India. And of course, before we went to India, one thing I stressed is that there needs to be a lot of communication. What is this? Why are we doing this? Why are all of these people from all around the globe, including the CIO of the parent company, coming and sitting with the teams? So there was a lot of communication. And I also mentioned to the managers, because this was announced months in advance, this is a good time for you to brush up on certain things. One thing I was very conscious of saying is that I don't expect anyone to code at GEMBA, because there's a lot of sort of, you want me to code? I'm not a coder. I haven't coded in 20 years. I've never coded. I said, no, I don't want you to code. I just want you to ask good questions, right? And I want you to coach the teams. I want you to teach them. I want you to learn from them. And more importantly, I want you to see really what's happening on the ground. We all flew. One thing I did was I asked all the Scrum Masters also to join the teams. I wanted Scrum Masters to feel what it was like to be in a team trying to deliver, so they can gain empathy. I wanted empathy all around. I wanted the Scrum Masters to have more empathy with the teams. I wanted the management to have more empathy with the teams. I wanted the teams to have more empathy with the management, and really try to bring the organization that's been fractured from years of distrust and anti-patterns to come closer together. We arrived in India. We attended sprint planning part 1, where every team decided what they're going to work on. And then managers decided, or leaders decide based on what the teams picked, which teams they're going to join for the next sprint. And I don't want to go into too much detail because it's in the article, but some of the things that stood out to me was one of the product owners, and I've said this story before, but one of the product owners joined the team and he was just basically asking them to make a very, very simple change. All he wanted them to do was to add a field in a dropdown. That's it. And the teams told him, the team that's working on that said that that's going to be at least a 3 to 5 month change. And he said, I just don't understand. When we first started this software 20 years ago, that would literally take minutes. I would tell a developer, add a new trait type. He would go do some magic and the trait type would be there. Now you're telling me it's going to take me months? I want to join that team. I want to see what's happening. Why does that simple thing that used to take a couple of minutes now take months? He joins that team. And this guy, he's the head product owner, and he's really, really brilliant at making the teams feel comfortable, which is a skill, right? It is a skill. He made them all feel comfortable. And he says, like, just speak to me in plain English. Why is this taking so long? Don't talk to me in, don't mention constructors or destructors or singletons. Just speak to me in English. Why is this taking so long? Went to the whiteboard. I happened to be there for this. And they started to draw the code in high level. And they said, basically, in order to meet our debt, we have multiple versions of the code running in production. Let's say 20. We have 20 versions of the code running in production, each of which are in a different branch used by different clients. And so when we make a change, we have to go to each of those branches and make the change, and then make the change to the master branch. Then we have to test everything, make sure everything works and doesn't break. We said, wait, let me get this straight. There are multiple versions of the software in production? And they said, yes. Like, why would you ever do that? But, well, that's how we hit our dates. When our management push us to come in and hit our dates, in order for us not to break the other systems, we fork the code and put a case statement at the top and say, if it's client X, go down this path. So he's horrified. Now he's like, why hasn't anyone stopped us? Or why haven't you? This is the first time I ever hear of this. Like, well, this is the first time we ever talk like this. All right. Usually it's, he's so senior. He tells somebody who tells their local managers, who cracks the whip. And what do developers do? For those who have a development background, they open the developer, magic toolbox, as some people say, right? Forking code, or these shortcuts that introduce technical debt. That was one thing. Another interesting story that I'll mention is the CTO of that company, not the parent company, joined the team. And every time they had to build the software, the team would just instinctually get up and he'd say, where are we going? He'd say, well, I'm going to go get chai. Like, why are you going to chai? They go to a place called Cafe Coffee Day. And he said, well, it takes like about 45 minutes to build the software. So we go have chai. And like, well, what? So there's 20 teams. Every time they build the software, and he's doing math in his head, right? And like, what an incredible amount of waste. Why? So he noted it down. And every day we'd have a debrief, right? We'd have a debrief with what everybody found in terms of waste and things like that. And one manager called them the OSHIT moments, right? How many of those and what did you have? And so what I wanted to show them, that every single one of those things that they wanted to yell at the teams for doing can be, if I did a 5 whys, can be traced back to a management decision they made. So for example, that build server that's antiquated, that's because the local manager is doing his job in India. And what's the job in it is to keep costs down. So they're keeping costs down. That's the nature historically of an offshore location, is a cost play, making it cheaper. So the local manager is doing their job by keeping costs down, not realizing the incredible amount of waste in the system. There is no way that these managers could ever have noticed this if they were not there. So this carried on, and some also beautiful moments happened as part of this GEMBA sprint. I remember one of them, the team that the CIO joined. This was probably my favorite moment because it's the most human moment of that first time I tried the GEMBA sprint. They had created a separate room of special food for us, like the people coming from outside, and the team told the manager, no, we're going to have lunch in the canteen. You go to the boardroom. They have lunch for you there. And he said, no, either we all go to the boardroom or we all go together. So are we not a team? And so he ended up going with them, eating with them, laughing with them. Then all of the managers and the leaders started doing the same thing. And so there's some sort of beautiful human moments. But like with many of these stories in these lunch and learns, obviously it wasn't all wonderful. Right, it wasn't all great. There were some managers that actually refused to join the meeting. I'm sorry, to refuse to join the teams, or they would fake it. They would go and just sit by the teams, but not really. They're present, but not really present.
You're back.
Sorry about that. Sorry. All right. So that was the first time I ran the GEMBA sprint. And it was really a success, but it also had some issues. And so whenever I feel like I have something that kind of worked, I try it again in a different context and see, you know, like, is this really a repeatable pattern, or is it just one-time thing, right? So I tried again in a large bank, a bank that many of you so far I've realized have worked for or have worked for, right? And so same exact pattern, but this time I had a lot more ideas, a lot more notes, a lot more lessons learned from the first one. And so I went to the managing director in this bank. She's awesome. You know, I don't know if I can use her name, but she's like a legend in, at least in my book, in terms of really trying to create genuine behavioral change. Because a lot of MDs are into what I call change theater, the appearance of change. Well, I don't call it, it's called change theater, right? The appearance of change. Let's just get the metrics to all work. Let's like, Ahmad, just help us get the metrics green because the product office has these new stupid metrics, or just help us with that and all that kind of stuff. That I have no interest in doing. But every once in a while you meet a person that really wants to create meaningful change. And she wanted to create meaningful change. And so I told her the story of what happened in India, and she was like, I'm game. This is a great idea. I was like, but I need you to clear your calendar. And she's like, absolutely. I get it. Let's schedule it. When should we schedule it? And I was like, she's like, look, we're coming up with some releases. Let's pick an easy time. I said, well, why don't we pick the hardest time? Why don't we pick it during the releases? Like, isn't that the time you're going to learn the most? Like, let's pick the worst time. Well, the idea is to maximize learning and to really understand how the system works, and also add value to the teams. And she was like, okay, I'm game to experiment. And that, by the way, is what I think an experiment is. An experiment is something that you actually don't know how it's going to work out, that you can actually get in trouble with, right? And this was one of those things. So I followed the similar playbook, but I added to it. In this case, before the GEMBA sprint, I think we had the lead up to the GEMBA sprint was like 2-3 months away. I had an internal coach working with me. She was also fantastic. And one of the things I realized from India is that managers at GEMBA, there's like this weird dynamic. They're like, how am I going to add value? What am I supposed to do there? Exactly. And so because of this, I don't know what to do or add value, they'll start checking their email a lot. They actually don't know how to be or do at GEMBA. And so, and teams also, like, what are they doing here? Is this some sort of weird new performance review kind of thing that they're instituting? So what I did was I created a series of like really simple classes called On Management. And they were just focused on what behaviors do you need to unlearn and what behaviors you need to learn. And I told a lot of managers, this is a really great opportunity for you to learn not to code, but to learn how to read code. There's a fear of code, like it's some sort of weird, like the Matrix kind of thing, the green stuff. It's code like poetry. You don't have to learn how to write it, but you can learn to read it. And you want to learn enough so you can ask good questions, like I said before. And so don't, like, if you're gonna tell a developer, for example, even a Scrum Master, always says a Scrum, if you're gonna tell them you should do TDD, well, do you know what TDD is? Have you tried it? Have you just done enough to understand really what it is? So this is a great opportunity for you to not just learn a little bit about tech, which is going to really improve your credibility, but also improve your confidence. But it's also a really good time to learn about how do you coach teams, which is what the Project Oxygen said is the most important thing for a manager to be, is to be a good coach. So what does it mean to be a good coach? And my friend Toby Sinclair has a lot of great work on this, right? What does it mean for a manager to be a great coach? So take this as an opportunity to really brush up on how to either code, learn to see waste, take a class in lean, learn to be a coach, learn, nonviolent communication. It's a lot of things, right? So that allows you to be a lot more useful at GEMBA. So we did that as a series of training. The other thing we did was that I learned is that when so many senior people are joining a team, there's the observer effect. People start working harder longer. So what we did was in this bank is every day at 5, we had pizza delivered, and we had debrief every day at 5. That stopped work at 5, stopped people from working until 8 or 9. So we had a collective debrief. All 100 people would show up, and we'd have a debrief. What did you learn? What were your observations? And what we did was, and this is in exhaustive detail in the guide, was I had this format where if you saw something that was wasteful as a manager or anybody saw something as wasteful, you would quantify the waste. So for example, if you're waiting for the environment to be ready and it took 15 minutes and there's 20 teams, you multiply 15 times 20 by how many per sprint, and you can able to see like what's the relative size of the waste. In this case, we call them turds, right? And we would weight the turd. Right. You know, so we had a debrief every single day, and that stopped it stopped the observer effect. Scrum masters were in the team, and me and 2 other coaches would sort of rotate around the teams and see really were the managers engaged, were they on their phones, were they on their laptops. And so that ended with a workshop, like we had a party, which was really awesome to end it because it was a really difficult, they picked a very difficult sprint, and we ended with a party, always end on a high, you know, make work fun. But we also had a workshop we called the waste management workshop, right? To take from the Tony Soprano, you know, Soprano's one of my favorite shows. And so what are all the waste that were observed, and who can clean, I mean, who's going to take on removing that waste from the system? Because one of the things in the debrief that I tried to impress upon the leaders, you always say, Ahmad, how can you make the teams faster? How can we make the teams faster? Well, you can directly make them faster by removing waste. And I would start doing games, as well as I'd pick a really difficult time when everyone is working, and then I would gather everyone in a central location while they were working and ask them to provide me metrics, just so I can show senior leaders what it feels like while people are working for all of a sudden some senior person to ask for metrics, like the context switching, the waste that they produce in asking for, you know, stop fire drill. So I would create mock fire drills during this very intense sprint just to show them, gain empathy, what it's like for a value worker to be interrupted, right? And so, you know, I refined it, and then I tried it in other places, and like, wow, this is really starting to work and starting to begin the behavior change. And I want you, before I break for questions, I'm giving you sort of the highlights, almost like a Rocky montage of like the highlights. You have to assume that in all of what I said, it's not just this wonderful fairy tale story. There were a lot of problems and issues, and day one, teams feeling very nervous and what's going on. And so, you know, sometimes I worry when I tell these stories, or other agile coaches tell these stories, it almost sounds like some sort of magic that has happened. What I can say is that it did bring start changing the behaviors that I mentioned in the beginning, which were what? How do I get leaders comfortable to go to the ground truth, build the relationships, right? How do we begin to reframe what managers do when teams are self-managed? And also, how do teams feel the urgency and purpose that by design, by definition, a lot of the senior leaders and senior managers feel? Because if you look at just a macro level picture of most organizations, you still have the power structures in place, and then you have a bunch of teams underneath. And those power structures, because they haven't been changed above the power line, still get a lot of the purpose. They still get the traders telling them, you know, you guys haven't delivered, or you haven't delivered, or they still get a lot of that sort of purpose and urgency. So when you bring the leaders closer to the teams, they start translating a lot of that urgency to the teams. Now, before, one last thing, just some calls to action. Think in your organization, there's like 57 people here. I created a video that explains the GEMBA sprint in 4 minutes. I think Gene sent it in the invite. Consider today a senior leader. And this is one of my top tips. Don't go to a senior manager. You want to make this work, you go to a senior leader. Email them the video and say, when would you be available to do something like this? And that's step one. You're not going to get in trouble. That's step one. And step two is schedule it. Schedule one in the future. And I'm happy if anyone wants to try it. If you go to my website, you can book 30 minutes with me. And I'm just happy to talk you through that situation. If you want help in how do you sell to a senior leader, although I prefer you just email them, or if you want help, if the article I wrote doesn't answer any of your questions, feel free to schedule 30 minutes, and you can do that from my site. And last thing is, if you go to my site and register to my newsletter, according to my daughter, it's the best newsletter out there. So that's but having said that, I'll stop now for questions.
Ahmad, great, thank you. Folks, the floor is open. Apologies for having a deck-free presentation. But I'm not here to answer questions, so please ask him questions.
You can also
So we can
type-
just, we just come off mute?
Yeah, just come off mute, ask the
Okay.
question, be back on mute if you don't mind. Yeah.
All right. First off, I don't have any issue with no PowerPoint deck, so no apologies necessary there. But my question would be, is there a way to go to the ground truth remotely? Or have you experienced that? Like, how have you executed that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one that I had to face during, obviously during COVID, when there was no ground, we were all in the clouds. And so one thing that I would suggest is, again, depending on what framework you use, and also depends on, does your organization use something like mob programming? If it does, it becomes a lot easier. So for example, if a senior leader is interested in going to the ground, like understanding really what it's like, one thing a coach could do is just to enable that for one sprint, pick a feature and use mob programming and have the senior leader attend. But the key thing is they need to really be present and not just sitting there as like some sort of weird observer, like in a zoo, right? And they have to find what it means to be present. That's a quick and easy way. Have the team decide to do a mob programming, and there's many ways. It's actually relatively easy to do mob programming. Another way, if you do something like sprint planning activity or a daily stand-up, they can attend a daily stand-up where everyone's gonna say, I'm working on this, and then they'll say, well, do you mind if I pair with you? It's going to be the same thing as if it's in person, right? During the stand-up, if Anna says I'm going to work on this, Karen says I'm going to work on that, and say, okay, do you mind if I pair with you for the next couple of hours on this? And by the way, what I discovered, I hope that answers your question. What I discovered is when the senior leader asks someone, look, I don't know, can you explain that to me? Can you explain to me what a unit test is really? That doesn't diminish from the person. That actually makes things a lot better. Right. And it increases the trust when somebody like, look, I don't even actually know what a unit test is or what's the difference between an acceptance test and a unit test. Can you just quickly show me? And so, yeah, I hope those two techniques, that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
No, my pleasure. There's two hands raised, Carrie and Manoj.
Hi, Ahmad. Thank you so much. And again, great job. So I think this is really helpful. I'm really kind of been diving into behaviors within leadership and kind of the language that they should use, especially with different cultures, and then also to behaviors. So I love how you were talking with when you come to a GEMBA, really learning to help them like non-threatening and that kind of communication. So I was checking out your website, which looks pretty cool, but what would you recommend, whether it's books, something on your website that really dives down a little bit more into that? What would be your suggestion if you're kind of really diving into that to try and help your senior leaders and help them to understand more of how to draw things out of the team versus coming in and looking as threatening?
Yeah, there's a lot of like, derivatives of nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg, uh, and many derivatives of that in terms of how do you ask questions or how, in a way that's not very aggressive. So like, I have this dream, like I love and hate Elon Musk, right? I love that he's at Gemba. I love he's getting the ground truth. I hate that he's doing it in a way that's very aggressive and makes people feel unsafe. I hate that. So how can you do what he's doing, which is he's literally on the ground, probably sleeping on the ground, but in a way that's non-threatening, right? And to me, it's all about character, being humble, how you ask the questions, and even asking the questions in a way that's not fake. Like, because probably my favorite book that really impacted me is, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And one of the things, one of the thesis of that book is that people are motivated by the need to feel important. And so that's why I love when leaders are really humble and they go to teams and like, can you just explain to me how this, like, just like I'm 5 years old, like how this thing works, and so yeah, so a good place to start is nonviolent communication. I can send a reading list to Gene that he can maybe send to all of you around, some of the resources I mentioned to the managers before they went to Gemba.
It'd be perfect.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect.
Right.
think-
Can I go
ahead.
next?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure. It is really great to hear some of this and whatever we are exchanging in terms of questions. I don't know if my question would be pertinent in terms of, the process or whatever we're following, but I thought I would also like to ask, did this, once you did this exercise, right, did it end up as to be as just a one-time exercise, or did whichever organization or teams involved, did they commit to doing this, again, every, I don't know, every whatever frequency, maybe yearly, maybe every 6 months? And second, did they, to their point where, okay, these deadlines had to be met or it was to keep costs down, did they come to a conclusion that cost should not be a hindrance in the future? Because mostly cost is all, budget always comes into picture, right? So, and that's where we have to draw, sometimes we are asked to draw a line, right?
You mean because it's too expensive to do this?
I don't know, maybe, right?
Yeah. I hear this a lot when budget freezes and things like that. And
or even like, for example, I'm saying like devoting time towards cleaning technical debt. They're like, we don't have time for this or something like that, right? It just gets pushed down the road, right?
Yeah, well, it's let me tell you something about technical debt. When they go down to Gemba and they see there's 18 versions of the software, then they can really feel what technical debt is. Until they feel and taste how bad it tastes, they don't even what is technical debt. Like, it sounds like some gump in your coffee machine. They'll deal with that later. You know what I mean? Like, it's only when they really, like I said, there's many OSHIT moments when they go down to the ground. And just like if you're following the Twitter thread, Elon now knows how fragile and brittle Twitter is. I'm going to assume that most of his predecessors really did not know. And so what's the punchline of seeing how fragile the whole thing is? We need to rewrite this. His predecessors probably just didn't really know. So if they know, and here's the problem with the agile community, or they believe in magic sometimes because they're sold magic, that if you do some agile stuff, all this stuff is going to be better. When what agile does is it just shows them, it should show them how bad things have gotten. Right. So if you, again, I know he's very unpopular, but he's just top of mind because he tweets all day. And Elon's trying to deliver all these features, right? And he can't. He'll say, we're going to deliver something in 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden he can't do it. Why? Because he's faced with a mountain of technical debt. He's seeing the organization and the technical debt because he's trying to release frequently.
Right.
And so that you need to show. And so if sometimes if they say, well, this is the it's too expensive, we can't repay back the technical debt. Well, then there's a cost to not being able to repay back the technical debt. It is when they go down and they really taste how bad the food is in the restaurant, then they'll say, okay, we have to invest in this. We
Right.
have to branch all of these all of this. But you had a first question too. I answered your second question.
Yeah. So on the second part, so in your whatever experiment or exercise, did they finally decide to go ahead and, clean up all those folks?
Yes.
In the
So
code?
the CIO decided he's going to take, I think it was 3 months,
Right.
and he was going to say no client. He decided two things: no client features for 3 months, which became 6 months. Actually, can you imagine this? A product company said we're not going to do any client changes for 6 months, and
Very
they
I
invested
can imagine.
and they invested a lot of time in automation after that, and upgrading infrastructure and stuff like that. Because at the organizational level, there's no easy solutions. There's no easy things.
Right.
At that level, and it's all very, very difficult decisions. And the systems that we have in place shield senior leaders from these types of difficult decisions. I'm not saying that their job is not hard. They're usually taking a lot of crap from above. Their jobs are very, very hard. But through a series of layers and translation, by the time it reaches them, what's happening on the ground, things are okay.
Right. Yeah, I can, so for example, I play an agility lead or scrum master, whatever you can call that role, but, we're used to giving velocity, capacity, but I can see product team, pushing for, okay, just give me what is the capacity of the team to take new features, but anyway, coming to the first question was like, did they commit to do this exercise regularly?
Okay, so I don't want to say just a blanket yes. The answer is yes and no.
Okay.
In some cases, like that was a really cool thing. That was a fantastic. They had, experiment, and we should do this again, and they didn't do it again. But but what happens is, although they don't do the GEMBA sprint again, managers will join a sprint. So not as an entire sort of 20 people join, a manager will join the sprint, and in some cases, managers end up just joining the team.
Okay.
And other times, even if they didn't do another GEMBA sprint, leaders, because of the relationships they formed, are able to quickly go to GEMBA and find out what's going on, instead of asking somebody, how are the teams doing? It's almost like asking, how are the kids doing? Are they good? Well, go to the park with them, find out yourself. And
Right.
so, and then other organizations would schedule quarterly or GEMBA sprints, just because GEMBA sprint is not very dissimilar to Scrum, right? Scrum and all these frameworks are just trying to get you to do good hygiene. Eventually, you don't want to do Scrum. You don't want to do. It's like any diet. A good diet is just trying to create good behaviors. Eventually, you want to drop the behavior diet and do the behaviors, right? It's not about doing Scrum. It's not about doing less. It's not about doing carnivore. It's not about doing, it's about changing behavior. The idea here is not that you do a GEMBA sprint. The idea is that you drop the GEMBA, and every sprint involves leaders going and spending significant time with the actual teams.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Alex?
Okay. When you mentioned your first offer to a C-level manager with going to the GEMBA point, I had a very specific type of person I met several times in my career, like a CTO. Maybe you guys know the pattern already. CTO making in-depth decisions, normally made directly on the GEMBA. For instance, making a decision on a minor version, on a bias on the machine in the data center, for instance, or something like this. And they're doing very often. And when I have these kind of persons in my mind and I offer this, I have the hypothesis that these people could say, oh, come on, Alex, I do this all day long. What is the difference between this and the things I do permanently?
Well, if you have a leader that's doing this normally, going to Gemba, I mean that's fantastic. The question is,
to be honest, I doubt that they are doing this.
yeah, I doubt it too.
But they're making decisions in depth. So how make them clear that there is a difference between doing in depth because of their former history of being a developer or people being and working on the Gemba, but maybe 10 years or 15 years, not anymore, and being in the cloud, that there is something different in their current behavior rather than going to real Gemba and understand the real problem.
So just so I get this question, this is a senior leader that believes themselves going to Gemba and actually goes and makes some quick decisions?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a leader at Gemba should not be, and this is a coaching thing to that leader, they shouldn't be there making quick decisions. They should be there coaching the teams on how they made those decisions, right? There should be sort of a teaching aspect to what they're doing, not go and say, I'm here for 5 minutes and I feel like I have to make a quick decision. It's like the old system thinking quote, most of the issues in software development come from leaders making quick decisions based on incorrect systems modeling, right? Which is quick decisions that make the system always worse, or local optimizations. So that's the first thing. It sounds like this leader needs some coaching around quick decisions at Gemba, which can be incredibly dangerous. The second question I have for them is, if they're a senior leader, does his or her organization also go to Gemba? You know, does the leaders below them also go to Gemba, or is it just him? Because you can say, right, and there can be some ego stroking, like, okay, you do it, but we need to model this behavior in such a way that the people below you actually are also going and removing waste and acting like you and being like you, etc. The reality is the majority of senior leaders I work with do not go to Gemba. And I do not suggest this experiment to all leaders, by the way. It's certain types of leaders that I suggest this experiment to. Others will tell me immediately, I have no time for this. And I won't even suggest it because of their sort of personality type. But I'll say one thing about senior leaders. There's this kind of like social FOMO that happens when one does it, and then like noise starts generating that like this person she spent 2 weeks with the teams working, and I'm like, well, why am I not spending 2 weeks with the team? And really, so there's also that dynamic when you start publicizing what happened.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I just want to, I know you referred to that video being sent, so I don't know if we got that. I don't know, Gene, was that video sent to all?
If you
4
just
minutes.
go to
Can you see the
GembaSprint.com.
hands up in the Zoom? There's people with hands up in the Zoom session. Can you see them?
Yeah, folks, we're almost out of time, just so you know. We'll take a few more minutes from Ahmad, and as mentioned, everything that Ahmad is sharing will be shared with you. Also, take a look at his posts in the chat window.
Are there hands up? Okay, I'm sorry, I don't
There's
know.
one from Karen, one from Dave. You can
Okay,
take
go
it.
for it.
One. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do ladies first. You know, I debated on lowering my hand. My question originally was, you know, how in the We Go Have Chai example was the company saving money with so much wasted time? So did that produce the OSHIT moment, and they saw how much more productivity was being wasted?
Yeah, absolutely. He immediately upgraded he did two things, the CTO. He upgraded all of the infrastructure of the local infrastructure for the build systems. He did it that day. And he ordered 2 monitors for all the developers because it was on an exceptional basis in that location to get 2 monitors, again, because of cost reduction. So one of the things I would coach them is that if you can remove the waste immediately, remove it. And so, yeah, that infrastructure was upgraded and everyone got 2 monitors because the CTO was like, how does a developer work with 1 monitor?
Oh my God, I can't even work with 1 monitor. But I also wanted to say that, you know what, your presentation is so vivid and alive to me. And I would assume for everyone else without one PowerPoint slide. And we can all go and see the transcripts and get every word when we get the link from G. So thank you very much.
I really appreciate you saying that.
Ahmad, thank you, Karen. Take one more question if you don't mind. I popped up the graphic. Hopefully it's consistent with your.
Gene, are you showing a PowerPoint slide as I'm talking?
Oh my God.
Gene.
I'm sorry. That's actually not a PowerPoint slide. That's a JPG.
Okay, fine. You just saved yourself.
But I'm not sure if I'm sharing. Am I?
Yeah, I can see it. Okay. Any other questions before we break?
Take from Dave if Dave is still on, and then we'll break.
Yeah. Great talk. I just wanted to say that one of the biggest. This is really good information, and I actually do something similar to what you talked about. But the biggest issue that I see in general is the trust factor. A lot of the teams, the people on the teams, like as soon as you introduce a manager or someone outside the team, their behavior completely changes. They keep their mouth shut. They don't get their work done. And so I find that to be a really big hindrance. And in relation to that, here's probably this is at least the same problem or a bigger problem. So as either a Scrum Master or an Agile coach, in reality, at a corporation, I have to report up to the devs managers how I think they're doing, because they can't show up to these meetings because then nothing will get done. So you have this inherent trust problem built in from the beginning, where your devs know that you're reporting on them to their managers who they're getting appraisals from. And so there's a great fear of failure. I don't know how to get around this. I see this everywhere. I wrote an article called Scrum Master, not Scrum Manager, but leadership thinks that as a Scrum Master and Agile coach, that they especially ones that don't understand Agile, they believe that you're a manager. They don't understand the difference between management and servant leadership, or maybe they don't care because they just feel like somebody's got to manage this. These are huge issues, and they really strike at the core of everything that you're talking about.
I can talk about what you just said for the next day.
Oh, I'm sure you could. I could too.
It's such a great question, and you're absolutely right. Scrum Master, not Scrum Manager. What can I say in 1 minute? Okay. One thing I will say is that the first day of a GEMBA sprint, for example, they'll be like, "What the hell is going on here?" The teams will be very uncomfortable, and this is day one, maybe into day two. It's really up to the manager or the leader to make them feel safe. Day three is not like day one. It's like when I go into my son's room. My son's in university, right? I walk into his room. He's like, "What did I do?" Like immediately, like he gets nervous. Like, what did I do? Right? It's a sort of weird same dynamic. And again, there's a lot of coaching and teaching to the leader or the manager. Like, it's your job to make them feel safe. I remember the trust equation I mentioned. Trust is credibility plus reliability plus safety. Like, do I feel safe with you? And it's all divided by how self-centered I think the person is in front of me. Most teams do not feel safe with their managers and do not feel safe with their leaders and do not even feel safe with their Scrum Masters if the job of the Scrum Master is to tell mommy and daddy on them, right? And so it all, to me, begins with a senior leader, like the ones I mentioned, whether it's the CIO of the first company or the managing director from the bank I mentioned. They showed behavior that other people could model. They were more senior than anyone. I want you to imagine this for those who's worked in India. The CIO of the parent company is now going to sit with you for 2 weeks in Pune, India. Can you imagine the level of like how unsafe those people felt? They would his bonus is probably this triple the entire floor, right? They only see him on the intranet site. Now all of a sudden he showed up and he's sitting there. He made them feel comfortable within the first day, right? And then other people below him would I'll give you like for example, I've never met Jamie Dimon, but I believe if Jamie, he's so charismatic, if he joined the team, he'd make them feel comfortable very quickly. Although he's like he's the CEO, like one of the most successful CEOs in the history of investment banking, right? And so I start this, and I'll say it again and again, I start this experiment with a senior leader, not a senior manager. So not the managing director, the person who manages the managing directors. They are the people I sell on this on this experiment.
Who's managing the manager of the manager of the manager? Who is monitoring the monitor of the monitor? Remember that movie?
So that's like a lot of time, like, oh, this is not going to work in our organization. You're not thinking high enough in terms of seniority. I'm talking about very senior in the organization and selling them on the idea, because once they do it and they see like that, it signals this is a high priority activity. Without doing that, they'll say we need more velocity, we need more efficiency. You know, this framework is not working for us.
All right, Ahmad, thank you so much. I'm going to call the shots on this one, and we need to wrap this up. People are dropping, people are pinging.
All right.
They would love to see the recording soon, and that's really on me. I'll try to make sure it gets out there soonish. Thank you very much. My personal thanks.
My pleasure.
Appreciation to you for making this out tonight. It's night for you. This is great. I'll make sure everything you shared will be syndicated wider. And once again, apologies to everyone for not having a deck for you folks.
Next time.
I think majority of people here understand the sarcasm and what we're saying.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for joining, folks. Hopefully you can enjoy the rest of the day and have a great weekend, and peace and safety to everyone.
Take care,
in various parts of the globe. Please read between the lines.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Cheers.
The dense among us. Thanks so much.